Welcome to Shared Insights, the podcast from BA Insight. My name is Pete Wright, and I'm here today with our CTO, Jeff Freed, and our special guest, Richard Harbridge. Richard serves as Chief Technology Officer and an owner of 2to-Lead. In his work, his writing, and speaking, he's become an invaluable resource to our community. He's a trusted advisor to hundreds of organizations, helping them understand their current and future needs. To the rest of us, he's an outspoken contributor to the field, an internationally recognized expert in Microsoft technology, as well as marketing and professional services. It is thanks to his widely regarded expertise in this last area that brings him to the show today, as we take on technology trends impacting the professional services and legal industry, what's working, and what's yet to come in our technology road ahead. Richard Harbridge, welcome to Shared Insights.
It's a pleasure to be here.
The professional services industry seems to be really unique and faced with unique challenges. To kick us off today, could you set us up with some of the unique challenges that you're facing and how those are impacting you in your work?
As you know, I work in a professional services organization, and what we do is technology consulting. And so naturally, there's a big overall trend that's happening, which is professional service firms have to deliver more value in less time with less resources, and to be more competitive, there's a lot more value-based work. And so when you take that and you put it in an IT context, a lot of the IT things that we've done over the years, whether it's installing a server, doing some infrastructure work, kind of keeping the lights on, that's not really what IT is about now. Just like our services organizations have shifted, now from an IT perspective, we also need to really transition towards value-based work. So a lot of the trends that we see from a technology perspective are those that really bring the technology to the forefront of, as a service within the organization, delivering more value, whether that's, through the acceleration of the cloud, enabling you to do things you couldn't do before at a lower cost, faster than before, or whether it's just new industry trends like mobility and other things that allow us to deliver more value regardless of where our employees are and how they work today.
Yeah, Richard, I see this a lot in various parts of professional services. I mean, BA Insight works a lot with law firms, also the big four accountancies, as well as IT consulting. And these are all high knowledge intensity areas. It's billable hours, so time is money. Do you see people using SharePoint more or less in this sector than others, and in any different way than they do with your other clients?
So I think it's interesting because there's still a lot of services organizations out there that, whether they're a law firm or whether they're, a related to a vertical, right, that's a little bit slower, insurance or public sector. And so what happens is there's still individuals that are doing services work. They're smart, capable people, but they're not using or embracing necessarily things like SharePoint. And so just getting them to use, basic document collaboration and things like that is still a step up. And it's a good number of people, right, that we can still touch and support. There's a lot of customers still out there that use file shares and more traditional methods. And, we know without confusion that these are less effective productivity solutions. And so there's that sort of baseline foundational work that we all need to continue to work on. But I think for those customers who have had SharePoint or they've had some other document management experience for a while and they've had the ability to collaborate internally and externally, now they're looking at what's that next layer, right? What's that way to take productivity to the next level, which right now is everything from social and social technologies and tools to these intelligent experiences where you use the data either as a proactive measure as a business, you use the data to improve the experience for your employees, new intranets, things like that, or the actual system uses the data to improve the experience, like Delve Analytics and Delve Discovery and things like that, where you basically can find documents and content, that relates to you based on the way you work. So I think we see a mixture of both, but we don't want to forget about those foundational people, because we really, when it comes to ROI, those are still the best wins for most organizations.
I am curious because I've noticed from my perspective that law firms in particular have been slow to adopt the cloud. From what I see at BA Insight, that seems to be changing really rapidly now, maybe in part because of the ability to collaborate with people outside of your firm. And I know that you work with a lot of law firms as well as a lot of other verticals. What's your perspective on the cloud?
Yeah, I think in law firms it's really interesting. I mean, the broader industry has moved to the cloud a lot faster. Law firms have a couple unique challenges, right? We have a lot of custom developed solutions. We have a lot of these vertical solutions that are traditionally on premises, and they didn't have cloud options. So I think there's sort of three overarching things that have happened. The first one is the cloud has improved. I mean, in the beginning years of Office 365 and some of these other technologies, there were challenges, right? There were challenges, especially in a hybrid state where you had a lot of workloads on-prem and you had some online, and they've improved that, and they've also improved kind of the transition to the cloud, made it easier to migrate, made it easier to move. So I think that has had an impact on, there's less of that huge cost and risk. And so a lot of more organizations, even in law firms, it's harder and harder to say, well, no, we'll just push that off to next year. I think there's a second challenge, which is, or a thing that's happened in the industry, which is that the vendors themselves, many of these law firms use and provide, like you guys are a great example, you're connecting the dots, right? So the vendors are building solutions like your connector frameworks and other things that just make it so much easier for a customer not to lose anything when they move to the cloud. So it's no longer a trade-off discussion. It's more a discussion of, how do we enable both? So how do we enable that speed and benefit of Office 365 while enabling, say, through your connectors and hybrid search configuration, the ability to search, your corpus of documents in a traditional document management system or something else? And that opportunity now exists, whereas even reasonably, I'd say a year ago, it was still very new, right? This idea of hybrid search or some of these other hybrid workloads. So that's helped both from Microsoft and the vendor ecosystem. And then the third thing that I think has made a big difference is security isn't what it used to be. So the biggest reasons people would hesitate to move to the cloud was, privacy and security. And now we see unequivocally everyone saying the cloud is better, right? Security is better. We have easy two-factor auth. We have single sign-on portals. We have mobile device management built in. We have, advanced security management that actually looks at user trends and behavior to, dynamically change defense techniques and take a risk-based approach to security, et cetera. So this analytics-driven event detection, all this stuff is only really available in the cloud because of what it requires. And so I think that's become a selling point of the cloud, if anything, over what it used to be.
I find that really cool because it's almost like a quick reversal as people get over the fear of lack of security and see that actually most major cloud vendors and Microsoft in specific are probably more secure than they are.
Too true.
It's such an interesting turn, too, because so many of the things that you're talking about here seem to be addressing or answering questions from users that likely are not thinking so much about these things, and that you have this ability to pivot when you look at things like the cloud and look at things like tying these on-prem activities to the cloud, that you can proactively give users features that they have come to expect without even asking. Do you find that users are driving more of the demand for these new features that you're rolling out and that you're able to deliver them more quickly with these services?
I would say that's absolutely true. So take mobility, right? While it sounds simple that more users are using mobile devices or they're working from home or they're working from customer sites or, depending on your services organization, this is happening really regularly. And so we need to deliver not just the great experiences that make it easy for people, to do that, like OneDrive for mobile apps and mobile management, things like that of documents, but it's also that it needs to be secure. So we need to do that security without adding friction to the end user. So the new experiences where you can literally not copy and paste, core corporate content into personal apps and things like that. These are features that if you looked at mobile device management, application management, even a few years ago, they were in most organizations, it was kind of in their dream state, right? Someday we'll get to that point. But now these things are built in. And so that's helped because if the expectation is by the other organizations that are using these cloud technologies that they basically have a lot of these new features and functions built in, then it makes it harder for the organization not to embrace them or not to provide better experiences. And while I picked on mobility, even in other circumstances, like today, if you look at the traditional way that we would drive users for, let's pick external sharing, right? So we've brought up extranets, right? And the traditional model is go to this place and share externally. or go to this place and work on your documents, in the example of the document management system. And so I'm not saying that those things don't have value. There's reasons you would still want to drive people to a central location for roll-ups, for data integration and other things. But that doesn't mean that you can't bring that experience to them in these other apps, like an app add-in inside of Office, or for the external sharing scenario, making external sharing available pretty much everywhere they are. It doesn't matter if they're in the extranet or in a secure intranet site. If there's a specific bit of content that they want to share and that makes sense to share for a variety of reasons, they can do that in a relatively secure way with good reporting and things like that. So this idea of just making these features more ubiquitous and available where people are, and making them more seamless, like this idea of get a link versus sharing and inviting specific and basically managing access to something, instead getting a link and just sharing that link. That's a very different approach, right, than we've used historically. And so it calls into question, is IT ready to have those conversations? Because if they're not, what ends up happening is the users are still doing that. They're just going to Dropbox, or they're going to some unsanctioned file sharing tool, or they're going to some alternative where they can do it themselves, and they get those experiences they want. But now you've lost more control, and you have an even bigger challenge now of disparate systems that you're managing.
Not even control, but interest. They don't care anymore.
Exactly.
Once you've lost them, how easy is it for you to bring them back when you do have an answer to this question? And my hunch is not very.
Yeah, one of the things I notice in professional services more than other sectors is what you were saying, Pete, that things are driven more by users' awareness. But to take two examples, external sharing is something almost everyone in a consultancy does, because you're working with clients.
Right.
And therefore, easy external sharing that is particularly important and is driven by users more than by IT. And security, similarly, I find, we work a lot with law firms, and one of their specific requirements is called ethical wall. If I'm working on cases for Coke, I shouldn't be able to see material about Pepsi. That's not out of the box with SharePoint. It's the kind of thing that some of our other clients would leave to the chief security officer. But law partners ask us about that all the time. How do you do it? How strong is the ethical wall capabilities? And we've built something that layers on top of SharePoint and changes access based upon what's in your practice management system, and layers that on top of search. I was really surprised to find that it was partners and attorneys asking us for that more than IT, even though, of course, IT cares about it.
One of the challenges for sure that we hear all the time for IT is, they don't have the time, the budget, sometimes the authority, and certainly the resources to do all the things that they know they should do or want to do. So one of the challenges, I think, even with IT is as they, maybe I'll even talk about the future state, right? So for a lot of law firms and these organizations today, they're in a state of transition. And that state of transition means that they're starting to adopt some new cloud technologies, but the cloud isn't as tailored for these custom solutions they're using necessarily, or other people haven't necessarily led that way. You have companies like yours that are doing a great job making that transition easier. But there's still in 5 years from now, it's going to be a much easier transition for sure than it is today in terms of the capabilities that are in third parties. Most of the core providers like you guys have done it, right? You made the transition. But if I take a step back and I go back to that original point, which is they never have enough time, budget, and money and effort and resources. The biggest reason I think IT struggles to have those conversations with the business is that it's a very different conversation than historically IT's had. So we run into this all the time when we do adoption services. So we do adoption campaigns to help organizations, get better use out of the technology. And one of the core things that we do is like a 30-day, awareness campaign. And you center it around some business process. So we want to improve recognition across the company. And every services organization, it's driven by people. So we want to recognize people. If we recognize people, that'll give more visibility to projects people are working on and reduce risk of redundancy. There's all sorts of positive benefits from just basically prioritizing and focusing on, improving recognition across the organization. And so if that's, say like it's a HR initiative or some other initiative within the company, communications initiative, that initiative has a whole lot of impact on the technology. We know that, social and SharePoint and other tools, the profiles that we have through People Search, those things are really, really great ways of connecting people and showcasing things like praise and things like recognition of one another. And so it's just that most organizations, the users don't know that those methods exist. They don't even know that, in some organizations that are experimenting now with social in the legal space, they're really seeing a lot of uptake because users have been kind of waiting for these opportunities to really connect, right? And there's ways to do it securely and without risk. But I think the biggest impact here is that we now can enable these things. And for IT, this is a big shift from going from basically turning on services to really driving awareness, driving education, driving best uses of these technologies versus just making them available to users. And I think as the technology goes faster and faster in terms of change, as Office 365 has new capabilities always being released, that emphasis is even more strongly on IT to take ownership for that. Otherwise, what's the value of IT in 5 to 10 years?
Yeah, absolutely. I did a session at Ignite last year about information strategy with Office 365. And one of the areas where I keep getting positive feedback is the IT folks that see this as an opportunity to become teachers and leaders and not implementers. That's a big jump. It's not necessarily for everyone, but it's a big opportunity.
Yeah, I think you could pick any workload. What's like a traditional SharePoint workload that's been around for a long time? Intranets, right? And intranets now with Office 365 are very different than they used to be. When you use analytics, I know you guys have amazing analytics tools. When you use that kind of insight to really, define the intranet experience, you can change a lot of traditional behaviors. So you can use search to dynamically not just target, based on department content for users, but actually use both popularity trends and targeting of content. You can do things like having the top navigation, which is, unheard of even a few years ago. You actually have some of those tabs be search driven, right? So as I hover over a specific section like sites or these collaborative environments, perhaps that's actually search driven. And so I can see things like recent ones that I visited or was active in. I can see things like the ones that I followed with bookmarking concepts and so on and so forth. So as intranets become more personalized, and as we start to use the fact that these all this activity that we're doing in these cloud-based productivity solutions, that's tracked, and so we can use that insight, and obviously the Microsoft product team's using that insight to improve those experiences. And so I think even the most traditional workload, like an intranet, basically a place where you get a lot of links to things, that's gone much further than it used to be with interactivity and these intelligent experiences.
Yeah, I think this is an area we violently agree that sort of intranets are back. Just like I find knowledge management initiatives are back. And search is an important tool through all of these things. One of the reasons, just to give you a plug, Richard, that I'm a big fan of To Lead is because you take this holistic approach and you're able to help people with adoption, almost directly. Take, for example, there's a praise feature now built into Delve, and that fits directly with the kind of initiative you were talking about for HR and recognition. How do you go about helping people figure out what to use when and how to successfully build sort of a positive feedback loop out of that kind of feature?
Yeah, I think it's just iteration. I wish there was a magic trick to this. Clearly, we have in hundreds of pages of white papers between the intranets and Office 365 white paper, the when to use what white paper, which I promise I'll get an update in the next month or two for Ignite. But there's just so much guidance that we could give. But at the end of the day, it's what are you ready to do? Right, within your organization. So you kind of have to have a good understanding of your current state. And surprisingly, a lot of organizations don't know what their current state is. And just that assessment and being honest of what your current state is really, really helpful. Getting that baseline is probably critical for everything else, because how are you going to prioritize whether it makes sense to really drive awareness and education around, the search experiences, let's say, or whether we should drive education and experience prioritized wise around, external sharing and working with documents in legal matters with customers and things like that, or with partners versus, the traditional approaches. So these things are hard to. I mean, you could just, try it, and anything is better than nothing, right? So, adopt some new things and embrace them and do it right, do the full, campaigns, the planning, everything else around it, not just deploy the technology and enable it. But I think the thing we're finding is a lot of organizations just need that perspective. They need a little bit of help understanding where are they at today, with some guidance on, okay, based on where we're at today, what are those workloads that best fit us? In legal, it's a really interesting description, because if we were to magically imagine a technology radar, right? So things that are getting close on the radar, like beep, 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 they're about to hit us. Those are, 3 to 6 months out. Things that are further out, right, we have to know about because we could hit them at some point, but they're not necessarily landing. When we look at that visualization, you find within law firms getting Active Directory integrated and these technology projects, that's happening now, right? That's BBB, but that's really close. And Skype for Business and using, instant messaging, chat services, video conferencing, that's been around for a while, but kind of transitioning that to the cloud, that's becoming, a very urgent need, because the cost benefit is just staggering. And when you look at things like Exchange or Office upgrades, that's delayed, right? Especially in legal, because we have a lot of add-ins, we have a lot of third-party products that we have to deal with, and we have very large mailboxes. It's not easy to make these transitions. So historically, in the broader industry, if you were to talk to, a high-tech services firm, they're already on the cloud for Exchange, right? That's probably the first workload they moved. But for a law firm, that's one of the last ones they might move. And so I think it depends on your own law firm, right? Is it the intranet and those team sites and the extranets? Are those maybe social? Are those things that are pretty easy for you to roll out if you were to look at the short term, and they could have a lot of positive trends? Then maybe those are the ones that pick up first, or OneDrive for Business. And again, other things get pushed out. So I think it's just imagining as a visual, imagine that radar and ask yourself, not only do you know what you're doing today, but what are those things that, you want to land sooner, right, than others, because you want to start getting those benefits.
For those folks that are listening that may be at law firms, there's an upcoming ILTACon event. Richard's often been a keynote at that event. You should drop by BA Insight there and definitely pull down Richard and Tudor-Leeds white papers. Especially, I'd recommend the when to use what in Office 365 and the intranets in Office 365 white papers. They're deep and quite good. And Richard, I think you're doing sessions on these at Ignite as well.
That is correct. I have 3 sessions. Camel's I got 2, I think, right now. We'll see if there's more by the time we get closer to Ignite. But lots of exciting stuff to talk about, including an intranets talk, the when to use what one. That's very exciting because things have changed a lot. So it's a much more positive story, I think, this year than it was last year in terms of groups being integrated across a lot of these experiences, and more coming by the end of the year. So I think, I'm a technology optimist. So we've been talking about the challenges and, all this transition, but I can say without hesitation, this is, if you're in IT, and especially if you're in a professional services organization, this is such a good time to be in IT, because we can have a huge impact on users and people that we couldn't get to before. Now we can really get to them. We can have a lot more direct interaction with them when it comes to looking at the data, working with them, and tweaking and tailoring these experiences. So it's a very exciting time.
This is great stuff. And it more to the point, it actually, you give me hope that we can, as administrators, learn more now from the intelligence of the infrastructure than ever before to drive where we're going to develop in the future. And I think that's a really optimistic view and opportunistic view that I think is new for us. So that's very exciting stuff. Richard, thank you so much for joining us today.
No problem. It's been a pleasure. It's always good. Jeff's one of my favorite people in the world to, if you ever have 5 minutes at any event to talk with Jeff, do it. You will learn like 20 things. So it's been wonderful to chat with you guys today.
Always a pleasure, Richard. You've got me blushing right now, but similarly, you're a wonderful person to talk with. Always enjoy swapping stories, and look forward to maybe some more of this.
Yeah, and if anyone else is listening and they want to connect or have a conversation, I know we're super friendly, so feel free to reach out to us on LinkedIn or through the contact links provided in the podcast.
Absolutely. If you're on your app, you can, podcast app of choice, you can scroll up and see all of the links that we've mentioned in the show notes there, and of course, you can listen to the show over at bainsight.com. Thank you so much. On behalf of Richard Harbridge and Jeff Fried, I am Pete Wright, and we will catch you next time on Shared Insights, the podcast from BA Insight.